Today I'm going to be showing you how to make some earbud cases. I have a little dragon here guy and a little cat, and these help your earbuds from getting too tangled when they're in your pockets. So these are just going to be made out of some really basic supplies. You're going to need a piece of felt, a pattern of an animal or a person that you've drawn on a piece of paper, or you can print out the one we have in the description below. You're going to need some pins. You're going to need a needle, some thread, some scissors, and a button. All right, so let's get started. All right, so first thing you're gonna wanna do is you are going to take your pattern here that you've got on your paper, and you're gonna roughly cut it out. And so yeah, as you can see, this dragon is now much smaller than it was before, but we haven't cut it out perfectly. Because if we are using pins, then we're gonna pin it to our felt here, and we're going to cut out around the edges. Alternatively, what you could do is you could cut out your pattern perfectly, like this little cat here, and then slap it on there, trace around it with a marker if you've got one. But I think it looks a little untidy myself, so that's why I choose to pin. So once you've pinned that and cut it out, you're gonna have something that looks like this. So the next thing you'll want to do is we're going to work on our button portion of this. So you'll notice on the original pattern here, I have indicated where you could put a button and a buttonhole, but you know, follow your heart, do what you think is best, because you get to know your own creation. All right, so I can kind of tell from here, this is about where I want my buttonhole to be on the tail. So then I pick that up and I look, okay, I want my button to be right about there. So I'm going to grab my button, put that on top, and then I'm going to take my needle, about a couple feet of thread. I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle. Best trick I can say is just getting, if you have trouble threading needles, is just get the very tip of the thread, just so there's just a tiny bit there, and shove it through that eye on the needle. Might take a few tries. All right, so you'll notice what I've done is I've doubled over the thread so that these two ends are matched up. Gonna knot them together a few times. Just quick loop it over my finger, make a knot. Since I'm working with felt, which is a really soft fabric that thread just loves to pull on through without catching, I'm gonna do a couple knots. All right, so going back to where we've placed our button here, I am going to hold the button in place with one hand. Got my needle and my thread in the other. I'm going to move my needle underneath my button and poke it up through one of the buttonholes. So as you can see, we're gonna draw that thread through. The thread is going through one of the buttonholes and through the fabric. Then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna find one of the holes next to our original buttonhole that we came up through, push it down through there, pull it through, pull it tight. So you'll notice we have a tight thread on top of our button now, so that's holding it in place. So the next thing you'll want to do is go to your remaining, if you have 4 buttonholes, you'll still have 2 left to stitch. So go ahead and stitch, come up through one of those that doesn't have any thread through it yet, go back down through the other one that doesn't have any thread, and so we're up. All right, so technically your button is attached at this point, but it's probably gonna come off if you don't secure it. So I recommend go back through your buttonholes like at least 3 times, if not more, just to make sure it's extra secure. This is a good reminder, when you're working with long thread, you will probably get tangled at some point, so don't panic. All right, so I feel happy about how this button is secured on right now. So what I'm gonna do is, the nice thing when I double thread is I can leave myself a long tail there. I've got 2 threads here, and what I can do is I can just do a square knot on with the thread. So, or you can just knot twice with those 2. Much easier than some of the alternatives. And that'll make it nice and secure. Just gonna trim up those ends so it doesn't look so ugly. Boom, we got 1 button here. But button's not much use without a buttonhole, so then that becomes our next trick. Is we're gonna look here at our placement again, bend that over. If you're using the pattern, that's great, but I wanna show you how to do it without. So that's about where a button is. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take my scissor, and rather than cutting all the buttonhole at once, just get your tip of your scissors in there. Just do a little tiny snip. Might take a bit of working at it. Then I like to just kind of shove the tip of the scissors through. Because again, felt is very soft, so that works well. And what you should always keep in mind is you can always make your buttonhole bigger, but you can't make it smaller again. So don't get too snip happy with those scissors. Periodically, as you're cutting, just check on your button placement, see how it's going, see if you can fit your button through yet. If you can't, keep going. Nice thing about this is it's not like a shirt. There's very little pressure on this if you put it in the wrong place. Okay, cool. I managed to get my button through, and boom. So if you want to, you could be done at this point. Like, you've got something that's functional, you can wrap your earbuds in that. Let me show you real fast what that can look like with your earbuds. So you've got them all coiled up nice. Put your tail through, button your tail, which I might have not given myself enough allowance for earbuds. But as you can see, that works. But what if you want to decorate it? Or what if you want to make sure your buttonhole doesn't rip out? Because that is something you'll notice after I've buttoned this a few times, you'll notice that your buttonhole is looking quite a bit larger than it did before. If you don't secure it, it's just gonna eventually rip out. So what my recommendation is, if you wanna secure your buttonhole, I can show you how to do that in a little bit. But for those of you who don't care, I'm gonna work on decoration first. I wanna give my dragon a cute eye. So I'm gonna cut myself some thread here, rethread my needle. So rather than doing doubling over on this one for your decoration, what I want you to do is go ahead and do a couple knots on just one end of your thread. So when you're doing fine details like eyes on adorable dragons, one thread tends to look a little nicer. This one you're gonna have to do a bunch of knots if you're working with felt like I am, because it's just gonna pull right through that sucker otherwise. All right. So now we have that. I gotta figure out where I wanna place my eye. I think I wanna do this on the same side as my button just because I think that looks nicer. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna poke up my needle up through about where I want my eye to go. Go ahead and pull that on through tight, make sure it doesn't come through. And then we're gonna make a nice big stitch as wide as you want your eye to be on top, and go ahead and poke that down. But do not pull it up tight. This is very important, because what we're gonna learn now is something called a fly stitch, which you can use to make eyes on your adorable creatures. All right, so notice how my thread is like nice and loose. There's like this little loop on top of my fabric. What I'm gonna do is pull it down a little bit more, and then I'm going to poke up my needle at a point in between, but below where my original stitches were. I don't know if you can see that too well, but yeah, it's like, if this is the thread, rather than putting it right in between, we're gonna put it a little bit lower. So, if I pull that up, and again, leaving that first stitch loose, you're gonna hold that down with your finger, your first stitch, so that it doesn't come up tight. And then you're gonna put just a tiny little stitch on top of that first stitch. So what your second stitch is doing, it's holding your first one in place so it doesn't tighten up anymore. And look, now we have this nice round eye on our guy. And we could give them some eyelashes. But the other thing you could do, say you don't want a nice round eye, maybe you want some like nice little triangle eyes. Well, in that case, what you're gonna do is all you have to do is just pull on your thread tight. So you know, leaving it loose is better because you can always tighten it later. It's a lot harder to get it looser again, but that has really like made my eye a lot more angular doing it that way. So, but yeah, so that's how you can do the facial features. So, you know, if this is the point you want to deck out, thanks for joining us, but I would like to show you real fast how to secure your buttonhole. And again, we're just gonna secure off our little fly stitch there. If you're tired of sewing, I get it. It can be exhausting sometimes. So, like I said, if we don't secure the buttonhole, it's just gonna rip out eventually. So, like we did on our button, we are going to thread our needle with a longer length of thread. Tie the two ends together so it's double threaded. Do a couple knots. All right, so what we're gonna be doing to secure our buttonhole, we're gonna be doing a little lip stitch. So again, on the back side of our guy, because we don't want our ugly ends sticking out there, we are going to find our buttonhole and we are gonna poke up our needle really close to the edge of our buttonhole. Like not a long ways out. We're gonna pull that on through so our thread comes up tight. And then rather than just sticking it back down like we have been doing before, instead what I want you to do is put your needle inside of your buttonhole and come in that way. So if you look at that, I have caught just a little bit of the buttonhole fabric in my needle there. And so then what that happens is when I pull that tight, is I've looped a little piece of thread around the inside of the buttonhole. This keeps it from loosening. And then all you have to do is just keep doing that around your buttonhole. And I'll show you what it looks like when you're finished. When you're finished, it looks like this. And that just keeps it from ripping out, but it's just got those little loops all the way around the buttonhole. And then again, you just tie it off and then you're good to go. But yeah, so that's how you make a little dragon guy to keep your earbuds safe for you. Thanks again so much for joining us today. We made some really cute like little dragons and cats to organize our earbuds at home or other cables we might have. And if you're interested in sewing and learning more, please feel free to go to mesacountylibraries.org to check out some of our many sewing books. And we hope to see you around. So.